Hi, I'm Morgan Poliquin. I'm the President and CEO of Almadex Minerals. We're a TSX venture listed company focused on generating new projects, and we drill them ourselves with our discovery-based approach. We're well cashed up, and I'm happy to be here today.
Good to see you.
Nice to
Welcome
be here.
to the UK. We're in sunny Cambridge. Well, not so sunny at the moment, but nice to have you here. Do you know the area?
I do, yeah. My mum's from the area, so it's nice to be back. It's been a little while.
Good. Okay. Well, we're going to talk business, obviously. I'm sure we could chat about other things, but let's just describe what type of company you are for people new to this story, just to understand what they'd be buying into.
Sure. Well, there's a category of company people refer to as prospect generators, and I don't really like it, to be quite frank. I think maybe we'll have a chance to chat about that. But what we do is we look for brand new projects through geologic interpretations.
Right.
And so we start at the earliest stages, stake them generally, advance them to the drill stage. And what's different about us, I think, is that we have our own drills, for one thing. We're well capitalized to be able to do that preliminary first pass drilling, which is the highest risk stage in terms of the odds of success. But at the same time, you're going from zero to something if you have that success, and which means making the initial discovery and demonstrating that there's something tangible there from nothing. And we've done that multiple times. So we've, in the last, I would say 15 years roughly, we've made 3 major discoveries doing that. So that's our approach.
Okay, you don't like the phrase prospect generating, so it kind of sounds like idea generator, which sounds easy. It's probably not. So how would you prefer to couch it?
Yeah, I think everything is born of necessity. So I think of my dad as one of the earliest of the prospect generators. So my dad is our chairman and founder of the company, and we're both geological engineers. And he started out starting a company at a really tough time in the market in the early 70s and not being able to close his IPO. So he did it by optioning the property. And that allowed for him to actually close his initial public offering. And so born of necessity, meaning you can usually generate more things than you explore yourself if you're an ideas-oriented company rather, in this space. And so the more irons in the fire, I mean, I'm sure there's a number of other metaphors we could come up with, the more your odds of discovery increase. But what we found is that it's very often hard to have your partners do that early stage drilling. And increasingly, juniors need more advanced projects in order to finance. So I think this is an ignored part of the pipeline, if you will, of going from staking to production, is this early generative effort. And so increasingly, juniors are more focused on more advanced things with resources. And that leaves people like us to come in and come up with new concepts and do that initial exploration work, which hopefully results in that pipeline advancing. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that, because I think almost the psychology of this for investors is interesting to me, in the sense that this seems so far away from actual cash generation that perhaps people don't understand it or don't feel it's something that they want to invest in, because they're not quite sure how value is created. So we're going to talk in this conversation, I certainly like to steer that way, in terms of how that value creation occurs, when it occurs, and for what reasons. But let's start with what you're good at. So what type of projects do you like to go and find in terms of, even before we get to staking, what are you actually looking for?
So I'm very familiar with something called magmatic hydrothermal systems, which encompasses a couple of deposit types: porphyry, copper, gold, which produce, I think it's 80% of the world's copper, a quarter of the world's gold. So pretty significant deposit type. They tend to be big. Low grade, I mean, that's a relative term. That was in the 60s, people thought of them as low grade. But they're large volumes of metal, and they're sort of shrouded, if you will, by large volumes of chemically changed rock, which we call altered rock, and that's clays. So, I hate to bring up this metaphor, but in 1971, the year I was born, was the first hijacking of an airline. In 72, there was 1,000, I think. And so when the first porphyry was understood, in the decades afterwards, there was thousands found around the world, and that effort is now reaching its sort of terminus, in that the deposits that were known and discovered are slowly being mined out. Chuquicamata and in Chile is one of the biggest, and it's reaching its end of life. I mean, they'll discover more things around it, I'm sure. So what you have to do now is look under cover, and what we've chosen to do is look under this pile of clay, which is often barren, that is known to overlie these copper deposits, and drill deep within that to look for basically hidden and buried copper deposits. And we think that's the future of exploration.
Right. Okay. So the two things that you look for?
Sorry, the second one is epithermal gold and silver, and they occur in veins or otherwise, and they are very often, not always, but very often associated with that same environment. And so when you're exploring through what we call that pile of clay on top, called a porphyry lithocap, you very often can find gold and sometimes gold-silver vein systems. A good example is in the Philippines, where a gold deposit was mined historically with copper for many, many years. The epithermal top of the system, a deep porphyry was found, and in tunneling to drill for the deep porphyry, to make that drilling more effective, they found a 10 million ounce gold-silver vein deposit. So that environment is sort of target rich, if you will, and so we focus on that. And once you have typecast the alteration as being associated with a porphyry, you know that you're in that environment. So whilst it may be too deep, too low grade, all the geologic, structural problems that come with exploration are still there, of course, but you're put yourself in the wheelhouse of making that enormous discovery, meaning you know you're in that environment where porphyries exist. And to me, that's a very special place to be. As opposed to just, well, we have some property that might have no genetic kind of environment that you're trying to explore. Now you're in the environment where, hey, we have a porphyry here, and we're going to take on the risk of it being too deep, too low grade, or whatnot. That's the exploration risk we all have, but we know we've got the chance of this sort of discovery potential that's significant.
Okay, so you kind of got this. Porphyries and epithermal systems are what you like because it gives you a chance of presumably more chance of hitting tier 1 type discovery rather than chasing something more mediocre. Get it. I understand. Makes sense. Let's talk about the process of going about doing that. Now, we talked about the initial stage of staking. What is the data sets that you're able to look at, or what information are you able to look at to allow you to do the most, I guess, credible and informed staking that you possibly can?
That's the key to what we do, and thank you for asking that. I don't get asked it very often. I did, just to go back, when I was in my undergraduate in Vancouver in the early 90s at UBC, epithermal systems were studied in New Zealand exclusively. So because they have the active geothermal systems there that are the currently forming gold deposits, if you like, actively forming gold deposits. So I went there to study it, and it was very rare that North Americans at that time went down there. And in the process, I studied an epithermal mine, a huge one in Fiji, called the Emperor Mine, and it was associated with these high potassium rocks. And I thought, where do those occur elsewhere? And I found an environment in the geologic literature in eastern Mexico where these high potassium rocks occurred. And I went there, and in the Pan American Highway, there was a big pile of alteration, and you could get gold out of it. And that turned into two separate discoveries. One, a high sulfidation epithermal gold discovery, and then later a porphyry copper gold discovery that we made. And that spurred me on to think, well, why is this occurring on the Gulf Coast of Mexico, not on any geologic maps, with no understanding of where it occurs relative to the rest of the geology of Mexico? And so I spent 10 years sitting in a helicopter flying around, and I ultimately did a PhD here in England at the University of Exeter, Camborne School of Mines, sort of recalibrating the geology of really Mexico and, in a sense, North America, because I was looking at significant plate tectonic events that are causing these brief, so mineral deposits, especially tier 1 mineral deposits, are sort of like singularities in space and time. They're unique events that you can trace on a continental scale. So what I mean by that is that everyone, I think, understands a little bit about plate tectonics, where one plate goes under another and a volcano forms. But unique things happen mechanically. So if you're subducting a Hawaii, for example, the plate might tear. You can imagine a lump going down and something tearing, and then maybe something going up and down. And that might allow this certain kind of magma to come in uniquely and contribute to the environment there such that you have these copper gold deposits form. And they occur, so if you think about the Andes, it's been going on a long period of time, but there's brief windows in time where the big deposits form. So I kind of figured out what was going on, I think. Science and knowledge is evolving all the time, but where these unique events, and I became fairly predictive. And what I noticed at the same time in the midst of that is that there was an event very similar in the continental United States that was, I believe, completely underappreciated. So the copper porphyries in Arizona, they occurred in what we call the Laramide, this period of time. But there are other porphyries and other lithocaps that are better preserved that occurred at a different period of time, younger in fact. And based on my experience in Mexico, not only sort of recreating the tectonic history based on the unique ages and things that I was doing, I'm able to do that in the United States as well. And what we believe we've identified is there are areas that are underexplored where there are porphyry lithocaps that relate to the same kind of tectonic processes that I believe elsewhere in the world are associated with big deposits. And so we've been able to go over the last few years in the wake of shifting away from Mexico and doing regional exploration now exclusively in the United States, and utilize those sorts of ideas to find areas and stake them.
So let's hone in. Okay, so we're now in the right parts of the world that we want to be in, where these big events happened. You've cut it for staking, because staking, like, it's not necessarily expensive in itself, but it's a lot of land package, and it all adds up. And if you don't do anything with it, it becomes maybe, terminal for some companies if you can't raise the capital to maintain these things. So how do you start honing in very quickly to what you actually need and what you can discard?
That's the key part, and I believe that exploration, one of the advantages of exploring at early stages and picking things at early stages is you don't become wedded to it. Once you've done a lot of work and we've spent a lot of money on this, I think, and again, not to be critical, but I think a lot of juniors become very exclusively focused on individual projects.
Yeah.
And we believe that the best thing you can do in exploration is actually negate a project, is move on from it.
Yeah.
So that you're more focused. If your exploration program is valid and then you want to know where it isn't quickly. So we have a number of filters that we use really early on that are a bit unusual, I would think. So one of them is understanding the actual minerals in the alteration. So there's minerals that are unique really to the porphyry environment, particularly when they're in combination. So clay, sulfate, and related minerals can tell you, look, I'm in the porphyry environment for sure.
Right.
And then, of course, there's always geochemistry. Do you have copper? Do you have gold? And those.
What are you using this? Are you using this as pathfinders to kind of vector in on where you need to be? I mean, how do you use that data?
So once we understand this general continental scale trend, and we start looking for alteration. And the next stage of our exploration program will be looking where things are more buried and more subtle.
Right.
But right now we're selecting areas that are very prominent. And so alteration in arid geography can be seen from space. And so we look at these big piles of clay, if you will, bleached, altered rock. Now, the only kinds of rock that will bleach in that way are volcanics and things that are really receptive to that. So there's variables there. But once you find these big bleached areas of clay, there's clay and then there's clay. And so we have basically, you probably heard of remote sensing. Well, we have proximal sensing, I guess you call it. Mm-hmm. So we have an instrument that will tell us precisely what the minerals are qualitatively in the rock. And it's a field instrument. We don't take it in the field, we have it in the motel room or what have you. Mm. But we quickly map out these rocks just by simply walking and selecting rocks on a grid or over an area. And immediately I will be able to discern this is not a porphyry or this is a porphyry.
Right.
And that is the initial filter.
Can you drill down on that?
Sure.
That's fascinating.
So for example, porphyry deposits, they form as much as 8 kilometers, but the kinds that we're looking for 1 or 2 kilometers from the original surface. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is that an enormous amount of fluid comes out of this sort of desiccating, if you will, magma, and hopefully a lot of copper and gold with it. The copper and the gold typically deposits in immediate proximity, and then the fluids continue to move away, taking some gold and some copper with them as well, potentially. But they basically start to dissociate, and what that means is they become more acidic as they mix with water, as they move away, and their more neutral, hotter fluids stay around the porphyry and body and closer to where you get the metals. So what you're doing is you're tracing that trend towards more acidic and cooler conditions. Yeah. And so the further away you get, the furthest distance, you'll find minerals that are highly acidic, stable, acid stable, and cooler environment. And so those minerals are alunite, for example, and as you move closer, you get a mineral called porphyry, and porphyry forms immediately above muscovite, typically. And so obviously this is generalized, and you can have overlapping and all manner of things can happen that are complicated. But once you start to identify a number of these minerals, I can throw out a whole bunch of obscure words, names for them. Diaspore is important to us, topaz is important to us, zunite is a really important mineral to us. Right. And you basically typecast this environment of the porphyry, whereas clay can form under a broad range of conditions that might be entirely unrelated to anything mineralizing. So that's one of our filters. The other one is something, obviously geochemistry. Does this have trace elements in it? An example of an environment where there was literally very little at surface to get excited about in terms of actual metal content is something called onto. And I think that's one of the most exciting discoveries of the last 20 years that nobody knows about. Vale made it in Indonesia, and they were exploring precisely this environment that I'm talking about. Right. And they drilled, I think it was 700 or 800 meters below surface. And again, numbers elude me exactly. It's out there. There's a wonderful video by the guy who led the discovery team, David Burrows, on YouTube. And I think it's 3 billion tons or thereabouts, 1% copper, gram gold. But that 700 meters they drilled through was totally barren. And so that's the other part of this environment that excites us, is we believe that in well-explored places like Nevada, the history has not been to look for porphyries. The clay alteration was maybe recognized, not in all cases we're finding, but if it was explored at all with any depth, it would be near surface looking for oxide gold. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of exploration over the decades is trend-oriented. And what I notice is that I know I'm jumping around a bit, but in Indonesia and South America, this idea of drilling porphyry lithocaps to depth to find that driving source of it, where it is highly preserved, meaning the porphyry hasn't been exposed like most of the mines in the world that were found in the 60s or whatnot, or later. That idea is relatively new to North America. An example would be the Resolution discovery or the Pebble discovery in Alaska. But both of those things were on the one hand, had lots of drilling and copper at surface, as in Pebble, before the big deep thing was found, or had been copper mines for a long time, like the Superior District. So we think that that's the future, and the sieves we use at the earliest stages are, once we typecast, this is a porphyry environment. We still take on all that exploration risk, the long odds of it being the right size, the right grade, too deep, et cetera, the metallurgy, whatever it all is. But now we've got a chance at the biggest thing there is.
De-risking as you move on. So I think, okay, so filtering out and excluding is a very important part of the staking process. Okay, and I'm sort of interested now in, once you said, right, I think this is a porphyry environment, or you know, what are the criteria by which you judge that as part of that staking process when you're moving into exploration? So look, we think we're in the right place. Here's what we're going to set ourselves out as bare minimum viable product, as we like to say in the tech world, whereby if we don't hit these sorts of criteria, we're out of here, because it's always discounting as you move forward, because you've got to work out what type of work you're going to do, what type of drilling you're going to do, to what end, because money's important, time's important, and all of those factors, you know, determine your future success. So can you just talk through that next phase? Once you've kind of said this, we're going to stake this component, we're going to filter down to a reasonable area where we think we've got a high chance. What do you do next?
Yeah, and notwithstanding that Onto discovery where a bunch of barren clay, somebody had the guts to drill it, and I think that's ultimately what it boils down to. So obviously you try to collect as much data as you can, as cheaply as you can. So typically the layers of data that you would add is aeromagnetics. There's now drone-based geophysics. We don't have our own, but it's relatively inexpensive to fly a property and get a magnetic layer. We'd have our own IP geophysics, and that's a bit of a killer app because it can be really expensive to do that commercially. And so we run these geophysical surveys, which give us a third dimension. And while they don't go necessarily as deep as we'd like, or this or that or the other thing, they give you something to aim at. And then geochemistry is the other layer, that is soils on a grid. They're very expensive, $50 US a soil sample, and you can imagine if you want to take thousands over a few kilometers by a few kilometers, that adds up. But again, relatively inexpensive compared to commercial drilling. And our ultimate killer app is to get in and very early drill a hole. And so right now we're drilling a property in Nevada that we drilled last year. And in drilling,
you've got your own rigs as well.
We got our own rigs. We've got 6 diamond drills.
With the cost.
It does. It not only helps with the cost, but also helps with the functionality. Like you can come in and drill a hole and think, I don't know what's going on here. I have to stop, wait for assays before I do another hole, or whatnot. So often with commercial drilling, there's a mobilization cost. You have to have a bigger contract.
Process and scheduling. This is a bit more entrepreneurial, isn't it?
It is, and we believe that. You know, I don't want to use Canadian parlance here, but whatever the metaphor would be, the more pucks you put on net is what we'd say in Canada, the more chances you have. And the earlier drill, so we got extremely fortunate is in our history, we made a discovery with the first hole of a program. And I'm also familiar with it taking a long time. So what you want is you want proof of concept. And so I think early on you should be seeing the kinds of signs, while you might not have made the discovery, that you're confirming the environment. It's faulted off, it's all gone, let's move on, is the kind of information you're looking for. Or as in the case of the property we're drilling again for a second round this right as we speak. Last year we found some sparse veins that were clearly in the porphyry environment, but clearly distal to where what we'd like to find. But it confirmed for us that this is a porphyry and it's here somewhere. So that's the kind of information you hope to get initially. Obviously, what you'd like to do is get significant grade or something with that to give you not only the encouragement that you need as an entrepreneur out there doing these things, but also the reward to shareholders. Because ultimately, what we're trying to do is make the discovery. I see my role in society, if you will, as finding that early. Somebody wants to go and society has to decide whether they want to mine. We live in a world where that could take a lot of consultation. I mean, what it takes to get a mine to market is something else.
The mining bit's hard, but making a discovery is hard. It's harder than most people think, because I think well over half the companies I speak to, no one on the team's ever made a discovery. So that shows you spent all your life working and never made a discovery. That's some going. Can I just ask you about, again, it comes back to, I used the word entrepreneurial a second ago, and there's something, it's akin to entrepreneurial spirit in companies at this earlier stage, especially when they've got their own rig. Just talk about the psychology of this, because do the teams, are the teams who run the rigs, are they employed or are they freelance? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, we hope over the 20 years that we've had drills, they've been entirely in-house.
Right.
And we're retooling ourselves in the United States, or we don't have crews for six drills.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
So is there, because I've run businesses, for the last 30 years myself, and it's kind of like you get teams that have got a vested interest. They are excited about this, and then there are teams that you buy in, and it's just a job. Then they've got no vested interest in future success because they'll be working somewhere else in a couple of months' time. Do you know what I mean? And I just think, so for managing the teams and who are managing your own rigs, do you see a sort of difference in behaviour? It's a small thing, but it's fascinating in terms of the personality and kind of a business.
Well, that's a really interesting question, because we've owned our own rigs, and I've been around drill rigs my whole life. My dad made a discovery in Nevada, and I was 3 standing on the rig, so I've seen this for a long time, and it's very unusual. Now there's a couple of other people. Dare I say it, that we've sort of led the way, but there's a couple of other juniors who are going that route of owning their own rigs, and we've trained our drillers how to drill from scratch.
Right.
And so what I notice in commercial drilling is the emphasis is on the profitability of the contractor.
Yeah.
So if you use more materials, then perhaps is ideal. Great, because you charge them
to behave a different way. This is my point.
Sure. Yeah. And so there's all other kinds of ways of generating revenue when you're contracting. Now, an internal drill team. And I've seen it in an operating mine where I saw commercial drillers up against company drillers. And, a company driller might be trying to minimize their use of products that are expensive and maximize. So incentive to drillers, it's an unusual career because these guys make a lot of money, and typically they don't stay on jobs very long. And so we have more of definitely a long-term company approach, and we've trained the guys from scratch. They didn't know how to drill before they came to us. So
that's interesting, isn't it? I think there are lots of parallels in lots of other sectors in terms of training from scratch and training to certain standards, behaviours, attitudes is the thing that kind of gets me. People got to want to be there and not just sort of reluctantly. It's counting down the minutes of every day. I've seen it in too many sectors. Back to what we're talking about, which is obviously building value in an organisation like yours. So we're now at the point where we've done a lot of kind of surface work. We've done a lot of the drone work and geophysics and samples and trenching and all that sort of good stuff. When we move to the drilling proper, like we started to talk about, you've got to think about the type of drilling that you want to do and the outcomes that you're looking for. And again, it comes back to that how do you determine what success looks like through the drill bit? Because as you said, there's lots of companies who will keep chasing and pounding away in the hope that something will change and something will give. You've got to make decision making a little bit quicker in terms of that evaluation of could this work? So again, how do you who on the team determines that?
Well, that's me. You know, obviously I've got a great mentor who's seen a lot of things over being involved in a huge number of discoveries. My father, who's our chairman. So we've got you know, people on our board, and I'm putting together actually an advisory team that's right now. But ultimately, you know, it's a field thing.
Yeah.
You never know what you're going to get when you drill. You really don't, unless you're in a mature project, of course. And it's exciting, but the idea is to kill things early, and that's something that I think is lost in exploration.
Well, people talk about that phrase "drill to kill," right? But I'm intrigued. Well, what does that actually mean? Because I don't see a lot of people drilling to kill. They're drilling to, in the hope something changes and stay relevant, and maybe allow them to raise some more capital, and for fear of, you know, having to announce a failure of sorts, right? You don't have that mentality. You're comfortable with that, and it's a terrible phrase, but with that thought process, with that business model. So what gives you that confidence? Why is it important for you to kill things quickly?
Yeah, I think, well, number one, because we have got a lot of other things to get to. That's the key to it. In fact, we have too many things to explore, you know, without moving through the portfolio. So, you know, I think, I mean, there's a gray area there where, you know, you're dialing in on something, and that Onto discovery, to come back to it, they drilled off a very small porphyry environment before they found this big kahuna. So somebody kept going. I think most other companies would have said, well, clearly this big pile of clay just has some weak copper with it, and why would we continue? But somebody had the guts to do that and find this $3 billion thing. So there's a bit of nose to it as well, I would say. But notwithstanding that, you know, generally speaking, you're going to have a reasonable feel of things with some preliminary drilling. There has to be something to give you the reason to continue on.
Right.
And in our case, we use it as, I think of it less as, I said drill to kill, or you said drill to kill, and that's, you know, but it's a prospecting tool. And that's how it should be seen. And there's all kinds of strange things. Like I know a gentleman whose name I cannot reveal, who somewhere in Canada was told to drill a hole by the company he was working for in a particular spot, and it was up on a hill. And he had far too many loggers the night before and decided to drill at the bottom of the hill. And that wound up to be the discovery. And if he had drilled on top of the hill, you would have missed it.
Right, okay.
So there's all of those vagaries out there, but you have to have something that gives you the impetus to continue.
Some of those stories terrify me, because it's like the exception to the rule is used as de facto, that's the way things should happen. But, you know, and there's enough examples out there of companies who've got lucky with the last drill, or they've accidentally found something, and it gives great hope to others to keep banging their head against a brick wall in the hope that that will happen to them, and statistically it does not. So it worries me when people quote things like that. Back to the valuation thing, okay, because look, you are the beginning of the filter.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of targets, a lot of prospects, a lot of options up here, and you filter it down yourself for the next guy to then pick up along the way. You've got to hope that we make a discovery, and then maybe someone else wants to take that mantle off of you in exchange for some shekels, is the idea. So can we, I'm just for sake of time, because I think I've loved the detail today, but just kind of bring it to, I suspect I could talk for 2 hours with you if I went through everything I wanted to talk about. Maybe we will another day, but let's say we've made the discovery. Let's say we've found what we wanted to make. You've got a big portfolio at the moment. You could cast your money far and wide. That wouldn't be a smart thing to do. Your flagship project's in Nevada. Talk us through where you're at with that, and you know how you close in on that to kind of discovery, and then what does that mean financially for a company like yours, a prospect generator, having made a discovery?
Well, we've made a few discoveries,
You
and
mentioned 3 earlier. What are the 3?
yeah, there's one called Caballo Blanco, and that was with a partner at the time, which was one of the Lundin group of companies. And our stock went to, I believe, over $2, whilst they were the earning a majority interest from us. So we had that experience as being the junior partner in a joint venture, option joint venture deal. The Ixtaca discovery was a big one that we made in 2010 ourselves, drilling a one-hole program that worked out. And then there's something called El Cobre, which we discovered in 2016, which is a copper-gold porphyry under a porphyry lithocap environment, also in Mexico, and that was a nice capital gain. So, so the outcome in the case of those particular discoveries, they all had different outcomes, and they were all in part dictated by market circumstances. So with the Ixtaca discovery, markets got really poor almost very shortly after the discovery, and we had to carry it further than we had
the ammo
hoped.
factor in that.
That came later, and that was political layer on top of it. So my view is, if I like to think when we make another discovery, we'd like to, personally, I'm not motivated to do feasibility studies. I've done that once in my life, and I've recognized that you take on challenges that take you away from your core skill set, is what I would say. So in terms of what could the outcome be for us, how would that, assuming that you have the market response to a discovery that's healthy, that everyone's happy with, I think you're looking for, particularly with a porphyry, that's going to involve a huge amount of expenditure. You're looking to crystallize that capital gain somehow.
So what are the options? We're JVs, NSRs, farm outs, sales, etc. So I guess it's on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, we're not religious. My dad always says the deal's never the final deal in mining. You do an option agreement, and the guys are close to earning their interest, but they want all of it, and they come to you. So the business is fluid, but the key to me is crystallizing that capital gain when you have it, because things change. Geopolitics, metal prices. The windows you have, you think they're going to last forever. They don't, is my experience. And we seem to be coming into better metal prices, a better environment here. But the windows are the 9 to 11 window was very short. And that's when we made our discovery. That turned out to be very challenging for us, because we had to then take the discovery through a series of de-risking efforts. And unfortunately, the geopolitics, things changed. But
I mean, that's a salutary lesson here in terms of why you need that option, lots of optionality on the table, and be able to kind of ride cycles and manage your own cash balance sheet, etc. I remember 2009, 2011. I remember 2011 to 13 when gold went to 1,800 and back down to 1,300 in short order, lasted about a few months. And I think the current gold environment is intriguing as well. People at 3,500, people think, well, whatever, 3,350. People think that's going to go up to 10,000. If I believe everything I read on Twitter, these things are cycles, and they're called cycles for a reason, and they do reset, and companies need to adjust accordingly. Prospect generating seems to have a longer outlook. In this. Now, you're very well capitalized at the moment. We need 12, 13 million bucks.
Yeah, we're just shortly expecting to close a settlement of a gold loan, which will give us another roughly 8 million. So we're very well capitalized to do what we're set out to do, this early stage exploration and drill ourselves, which gives us a lot of flexibility on how we approach this early stage drilling, as opposed to maybe waiting for partners or trying to sell our wares a bit more. We can just go in and follow our gut and do this early first pass drilling on the properties.
Would you say that's obviously critical to? You don't want to be like going out with a begging bowl every 6 months as a prospect generator, or even as an explorer, quite frankly, you don't want to be constantly spending your time raising capital. It's what you said earlier, that we want to do what we're really good at. So how have you managed to kind of put this big chunk of money and maybe another 8 million coming down the line together to allow you the breathing room to do what you want to do?
Well, I think we're fairly careful with the money, on the one hand. But on the other hand, we've been able to monetize some of our assets. One year we were able to do some third-party drilling that gave us significant revenue. We sold a royalty. We have been able to settle this gold. So we have assets in the company, and that's the legacy of 30 years. For example, we have a zinc project that we don't talk about because we're not focused on it particularly, but it's got a resource, and at some point zinc will be important again.
How do you pick that up if you're like focused on porphyry, etc.? I mean, that seems a random thing.
Yeah, it's a legacy asset from our distant history.
Right,
but
with a different business model back then.
Sure, yeah, and but after 30 years of exploration, we have had some success, and we've accumulated things, and they all have their day. So we have been able to leverage those decades of projects and discoveries.
So these assets, this semi-liquid assets that you've got, so having the mix of the blend of the NSR and some assets and non-core assets, I should say, was that important as well? Because these cycles ebb and flow.
It's proven to be, but I think it's just the result of years of work. And of course, there are times where you do go with, we staked some diamond projects during the diamond time, and that was important to the company. But typically, what we've done the last at least 20 years is focus on what we know best in this. What I call the magmatic hydrothermal environment, epithermal. I did my master's, as I said, studying how epithermal systems form. We understand it very well. And I think, to get back to the fellow who had too many loggers, that was part, I think you'd be interested to know, there's a man called Albert Kaufman, and he found 20 mines in 18 years. And he did it by doing something systematic. So what he did was they were using a new technology. They had airborne geophysics, and they were looking for VMS deposits. And because it was under swamp, there was very little geology that could be employed. Right. And so they were like locusts. They had their own airplanes, they had their own drills, and they had their own geophysics. Right. And it kind of went like they would, in the wintertime, they would fly out the geophysicists. And my dad was a young geologist working with Mr. Kaufman. And how he made this bunch of discoveries was being highly systematic. They went and drilled everything. And now they were drilling geophysical anomalies, so maybe you can refine it a lot better with good geology, with the stuff I'm using, perhaps. But it was the systematic, rigorous approach to it. Now, most juniors don't have that capacity. And certainly until recently, we're wary about drilling. But what you want to do, and he went 8 years, 18 mines in 20 years, but he went 8 years without making discovery. And so you have to be systematic about it. And you have to pair your nose with the financial ability and just being simply systematic about it and making it happen. And so we've got this portfolio of things, and it's come with this continental scale geological approach, and we've got the capital and the drills, and that's our plan. It's a very exciting, I think, very unique situation to be in.
I'm going to jump to the end a bit here. I know that I'm leaving gaps, but we'll deal with it another time. The value creation, which I said at the outset, we need to understand, or shareholders, investors need to understand where the value comes. Clearly, a discovery, and let someone else do the economic phase component. That's kind of critical to what you do, and how you get paid and what the deal structure looks like you're saying is kind of irrelevant, as long as fair value is paid and both sides feel they've got something out of this. Going forward with your portfolio at the moment, the focus is clearly Nevada initially, but you've got a big portfolio of assets. Where's the value coming from in the short term, do you feel?
Yeah, we're drilling currently, and we want to continue that. We've got 3 properties. We've optioned a sister company that, and those will be on the slate to be drilled. And but it's kind of very similar to what Mr. Kaufman did, is to systematically go through and do first pass drilling. All of these properties are very early stage, but we've done enough work on them to define where we want to do that initial drilling and to be certain that we're in the environment that we want to be in. So expect the next year and a half to be entirely focused on first pass drilling. We're still out there generating things. We're not done with that either. That's the other part of what I'm doing, is I don't think that this concept is fully wrung dry from our point of view. We don't go out there and take on established projects. We're looking for things that are in new terrains, and we're still out there staking projects and evaluating this concept on that scale. So expect another catalyst is the potential for adding new projects combined with the drilling. It's all early stage, but you're one drill hole away from demonstrating value.
And that's what people are looking for when they're looking for new projects. They want to understand. They've got to buy your thesis, first of all, and they've got to value the work that you've done on that. But it's a pretty good start.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. Yeah.
Good to see you.
Great to see you.
Thanks for making the time to come see us. I know you've got the family here as well, so we'll let you get back to that.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks.